And we are live. How's it going, everybody? It's your boy Wardy, and we're back at it with our latest edition of the live show here on WardyNYM today. And today I'm hosted this show along with a very good friend of mine. You can find him as the co-host of the Mets Pod on SNY, and of course SNY's #1 Mets prospects writer Joe DeMayo is coming on today, as Joe and I are going to be breaking down his top 10 rankings for the Mets prospects this 2024 season. And hilariously enough,
someone outside just keeps saying their damn car alarm off. But hey, welcome to live, people.
Welcome to live. Also, apologies in advance, everybody. If there's any Wi-Fi hiccups, if there's any stuttering on Joe's end or my end, it's my doing. Unfortunately, I've had a Wi-Fi issue earlier today, so apologies in advance. But anyways, Joe and I were going to deep dive everything that you guys need to know about the Mets top 10 prospects. And I have a lot to say about this too, because there are some guys I'm a little surprised that Joe doesn't have in his top 10 ranking. So I want to hear the reasoning for why exactly that is. But as we know, many of the guys in today's list are guys that are likely going to crack the bigs at some point this season. So a lot of very informative things that we're going to get into on these top prospects. A lot of guys that, again, could be impacting the Mets as soon as the season, if not the next couple of years. So very exciting discussion that we're about to deep dive. And Joe, let's just dive right in with the man who, of course, is at your number 10 for your ranking, none other than Mike Vasil. Vasil, of course, is coming off of a season, in the minor leagues where he wasn't by any means, the best thing since sliced bread. However, he was pretty productive. He was able to eat innings for you, and he did have some stretches of brilliance. So what can you say about Mike Vasil, and what was his reasoning for being your final pick in your top 10 list?
So when I make my list, I try to balance upside and floor. And I think a lot of times when people think about prospect lists, it is purely upside. And I think when you look at Vasil, you go back to when he was in high school, he was a first round type of player. Like, I believe MLB Pipeline had him ranked 25th in the entire class, and he pulled himself out of the draft to fulfill his commitment to Virginia. So sometimes you'll see these highly regarded guys get drafted late, not sign, go to school. He just said, I'm not in the draft, so don't even, I'm just not a part of it. Went to Virginia. They kind of changed him into a sinker slider guy, which is a little bizarre. He was kind of mid pretty much through his college career, is the best way to put it. And that caused him to fall to the 8th round. The Mets remembered back to what they scouted him as a high school player and said, we're going to take kind of what he did then and bring it into the pro game. And now he's back to, a 4-seam fastball. It's a 4-pitch mix, 4-seam fastball, gyro slider, curve change. And he reasonably locates all 4 pitches. None of them are truly plus type of offerings, but it's kind of 4 pretty good pitches that he locates. He knows how to pitch. He's a competitor on the mound. If you look at his stats in 2023, there was an adjustment for him and a lot of pitchers with the ABS system in AAA, and that's something that is in theory going to keep improving. But that's just something to monitor when you think about pitching prospects when they get to the AAA level. They're going from umpires calling to the ABS, and how does that adjust to pitchers like Dom Hamill, who didn't make my top 10, but someone who the ball moves so much.
Right.
Fastball, slider, all that stuff. How is the ABS going to pick up a ball that moves so much? So I think that impact Vasil to a degree. But to me, he looks every bit of a number 4, number 5, back end type of starter that should be ready for the big leagues. As soon as there's a need and they feel like adding him to the 40-man roster over using someone like a Tyler McGill or a Jose Butto.
Yeah, Vasil to me feels like that next man up, right? When you look at the Mets guys available, of course, you can make the same argument for a Christian Scott that we're going to get into a little bit later in this video, but Vasil's right up there with the Mets pitching on the guys that are, fringe MLB caliber, where at this point it's okay, let's see what we have in you when the time is right. And with the Mets having, while be it a good amount of pitching depth this season, they do lack a decent amount of that quality, which is why we're going to see a plethora of arms this year. And that's where, again, a guy like Vasil could be making his first Tyler McGill or David Pearson impression, where he is getting the call to again see what he has. And I think the upside in someone like him too is that, yes, don't get me wrong, his numbers overall last year, a sub 5 ERA, a little underwhelming, and it kind of shows you the lack of quality depth the Mets currently have in their farm when evaluating pitching. It's still something that they're building, right? And still, though, when I look at Vasil and kind of what he's done so far in his career, he's been able to, of course, provide a decent amount of innings. We saw this last season. He pitched in almost 30 starts over 120 innings. So ideally, you don't want him to pitch anything remotely close to that for the Mets this upcoming season. However, if he's going to pitch at all, hopefully, again, this could be a nice little taste for him in a 2024 Mets year where, again, this is the prime time, the best time you could rightfully argue to give these kids a little bit of a leash to see what you have in them before you fully commit to, say, a veteran option, whatever it may be. So I agree with you on Vasil. I definitely would have him right around 10, personally, my ranking too. I think the biggest thing that I would change that we're going to get into, obviously, is Marco Vargas, and that can go in hand with Kevin Parada a little bit. But before we go there, let's talk actually a bit about who's in the live show. I want to shout out everyone for chiming in live on a replay. Thank you guys all so much for being here. It's greatly appreciated. See Dominic, great member here on the channel, says, I'm having a drink tonight. I just made over 3 years of the best Mets streaming on the World Wide Web. Yes, I'm talking about WardyNYM. Thank you so much for that. I really do appreciate it. See CP, Ricky, all you guys in here, thank you all so much. And also, Joe, before we go further, I want to congratulate you guys. I saw that you came in second for, the best baseball pod. That's a nice flex. I know, obviously, you would have liked the crown, but hey, look, coming in second to a former MLB GM can't hurt too much, right? So congratulations to you and Connor. That's awesome.
No, thank you. It's crazy to think. It's just, we were a couple guys that started a Mets podcast and got the deal with SNY, and it's taken off in a great way. So yeah, no, thanks to everyone for voting, because that's the reason that we were even able to do that. So yeah, love it. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Yeah, and especially seeing that is a great example of not only you and Connor, but so many others in the space being the pavers, right? Like, you guys are really true examples of exactly what we're doing now and taking it to another level, right? Getting to that second point beyond just like staying stagnant and comfortable where you are. So I commend you guys both greatly. You both turn out awesome content. And now let's get into a guy who, again, we were just talking about briefly, and Kevin Parada, because unlike what was the case with someone later on the video and say Jett Williams, Kevin Parada had a fairly underwhelming year in the minors overall this past year. So what was your initial reactions to Parada's 2023 season as a whole? Of course, for those that don't know, Parada was a top draft pick by the Mets just a couple years ago, catching prospect for them, but again, has had a little bit more of a lateral growth versus kind of what you'd expect over this past calendar year. So what can you say about Kevin Parada, and what was your reasoning to having him here at 9 in your rankings?
Yeah, it was certainly an underwhelming year. And I think to some degree, shockingly on Twitter, things are blown a little out of proportion. I think there is this narrative that Kevin Parada is no good. He's had one professional season. And,
he's a bum.
And I think when you look at the success of Francisco Alvarez, I think Mets fans have been a little taken out of touch as to what it takes to develop as a catcher in pro ball. It takes so much longer than any other position. And Francisco Alvarez is just an absolute freak show. And Kevin Parada, where I was disappointed, I expected, coming out of Georgia Tech, where the Mets took him number 11 overall, I thought he would just beat the crap out of the low minors. He'd start in Brooklyn and he'd demolish them, and then maybe he'd get his first, bit of adversity at the AA level. And that's, pretty common, but he was kind of just okay offensively, and the batted ball profile wasn't ideal. He struck out kind of more than I thought he would. Defensively, he did get better as the year went on as a receiver. The throwing arm is a problem. There's no way around it. It's a well below average arm. The stolen base numbers are ridiculous on him. It was not a good year trying to throw out runners for Kevin Parada, but there's still power in that bat. I still think there's enough potential that I think it is, these are all subjective lists. Everyone can have their own opinions, of course. I think it's taking the hate a little bit too far on one season of results to drop Kevin Parada. Last year, I had him inside my top 5. I think kicking him out of the top 10 because he had a solid, not great first professional season would have been a little bit of an overreaction.
So, and this is all everyone's personal opinions, right? Like if I did my own prospect list right now, which I have in the past, it wouldn't be very different from yours. But the one thing that I personally would probably change is Parada in the top 10. I would have him at 11, and I would have Marco Vargas say just outside the top 10 in here at 9. So what's your reasoning as to why Marco was not able to crack the top 10? For those that don't know, this was a top prospect that the Mets managed to acquire in the David Robertson trade last year, and that was as lopsided as they come right away. Unfortunately, D-Rob didn't have the same amount of success with the Mets as he did in Miami, and for the Mets, they acquired 2 prospects, one of which headlined by Vargas, that already many can deem as a top 10 prospect in the organization. So what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I think positional value is a factor here. Like,
okay.
Catcher is a very valuable position, and Kevin Parada, the question's going to be, like, I spoke to 3 different scouts as part of going through my list just to like fact check myself.
Right.
And all 3 of them said Kevin Parada is going to be a Major League Baseball player. It's just a matter of, does he turn around offensively and grow enough defensively to be an impactful one, or is he just a low-end starter kind of player? Whereas Marco Vargas, he's going to be a second baseman long-term, and that positional value is not overly high. I don't think there's a ton of power coming his way. I think you'll have some, but Marco Vargas, I don't look him as like a future 20 home run bat. His game is average on base and solid defensive ability at second base. He's not a tremendous athlete, so he's not going to be, a big base stealer. So it's kind of like the Marco Vargas trade for Robertson, huge win. I have him 11. I like him quite a bit, but I think he's just not as complete of a player as you would want to see from a middle infielder to throw him at the 9 spot for me. But still, really, really good plate discipline. Had, I think, 20 or 30 more walks than strikeouts this season. And yeah,
that's
Marco
awesome.
Vargas, good player. Marco Vargas, good player.
Yeah, love the hand eye there. That's what we love to see. And I see Carson in the chat. Funny enough, shout out to you, Carson, as always, brother. Also shout out to Dave, great member, Matthew, all you guys. Carson says, I saw Parada's arm firsthand when he airmailed a throw to third and nearly knocked out an old woman in the front row of right field bleachers. Very erratic arm. So staying on the top.
That is, he was throwing the third in someone in right. Wow, that was a miss.
He corrected it right after and said left field.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, damn. That's
how does that even happen? It would have ricocheted all the way over there. But so here's my pros and cons to Parada for you to share your final remarks on. He landed in the draft the way he did with the Mets because of his bat first mentality. That's what carried him obviously through high school into college there with Georgia Tech, and now we see his first full year kind of in the mires of the Mets, it being underwhelming. And again, this is a reality check that a lot of top prospects have, especially if you're a top draft pick, say you were raking in college, you come over the bigs, and his numbers aren't horrendous by any stretch. Again, a 750 OPS, a 250 average, obviously not ideal for a guy that you hope can project to be a player on this roster, already having these struggles in, say, high A or to start out double A, but still he definitely has the tools. And personally, I feel like if Parada stays in the organization, I don't know why, but he gives me the vibe of someone that might not project well as a catcher down the line. He might be someone that I could see toying either as an infield position, whether that's first base or potentially left field. I mean, if he wants to be good as someone like Kyle Schwarber, not that he's going to be good, but knowing that this is a guy that started as a catcher, turned corner outfielder / DH. So when looking at his defense in particular, how do you feel about Parada and the prospect of him potentially being Alvarez's backup in the next year and a half, 2 years?
I mean, that's within the range of outcomes for sure. It's just a matter of how do the Mets, because they are going to be keeping him at catcher in 2024. Just for clarity, if there's any misconceptions about that, they are continuing to develop Kevin Parada as a catcher.
Okay.
So that what that means is, as the Mets head into the trade deadline and next offseason, where if they're having a good first half, do they make an impactful trade? Can Kevin Parada be someone that's a part of that trade if he were to have a better first half than he did of his first season? or next offseason, of course, where I think you and I and most expect a much more aggressive approach from the Mets than
Right.
certainly happened this past offseason. So defensively, I think the receiving has gotten to the point where they believe that'll be able to play. It's just a matter of working on the mechanics of throwing, because it's below average arm strength, but there are catchers that don't allow a million stolen bases with below average arm strength. So if you're going to be below average in arm strength, you have to find a way to have a quicker pop time. You have to get out of your stance and get the ball out.
Right.
Because when we say below average arm, that's in comparison to major league catchers, right? So he could throw the baseball, but he certainly needs work on his throwing mechanics, and I think that's going to be a big focus for the Mets here in 2024.
Good. No, I'm happy to hear that, because again, if they can continue to work on his defensive game, and mind you, I'm all ears on the idea of, okay, even if the guy maybe doesn't look like he projects well, see how he's going to fare once he does get to the MLB level. Because if Francisco Alvarez taught us anything, and he taught us a lot the past year, but if there's one thing he did, it's that initial expectations behind the defense might not actually be reality in a good way. I mean, no one thought Alvarez was going to come to the bigs and have, let alone average defense or even plus defense, which he had for the majority of the season once he really got himself grounded after that tough start. Those first 2 weeks, he couldn't hit, he couldn't defend, he was struggling everywhere. But then after that, he honed in and he became one of the best framers in the game of baseball. He, of course, has not just an electric arm, but an accurate arm, albeit. So there's a lot of things to love about what Alvarez has done, and knowing the initial expectations versus, superseding them, I think we could have potentially the same thing here with Parada. I just hope that not only his defense certainly upgrades this upcoming year, but also the bat to ball skills. Again, just getting more comfortable at the pro level. This is going to be hopefully a big year for him in this Mets organization.
And that's a part of it too, Wardy, right? Think about it this way. When you are teaching someone a new position, so I know you mentioned, could he play first base? Could he play left field, or whatever position you want to name? When you're trying to have a player figure out the offensive side of things in the minor leagues, you're better off keeping them at a position where they're comfortable, because now Kevin Parada is thinking about playing left field while he's up at the plate. Whereas
Right.
if he's at a position he at least knows, he can focus more on the task at hand.
Understood. Yeah, no, agree with you fully there. So we talked about Kevin Parada for a decent amount. Now let's talk about a man who is one of my personal favorite prospects when evaluating pitching, and that is none other than Blade Tidwell. Blade Tidwell, just a recent draft pick a couple years ago by the Mets as well, has been deemed by many as either the Mets' top pitching prospect or one of them. You have him as the Mets' second pitching prospect, second best rather, currently in the organization. So give me your reasoning behind Blade Tidwell after having, again, a very solid year in high A and double A, 3.5 ERA this past season in 25 games, just under 120 innings. So what was your biggest takeaway from Blade Tidwell this past year, the minors, and ultimately, why do you have him here at number 8?
Tidwell was my number one pitching prospect before, and he didn't do anything wrong. It's not his fault that he's not number one. It's because of how freaking good Christian Scott is.
Out of nowhere. That's the best part.
For sure. And Scott jumped Tidwell. But when you look at what Tidwell possesses, probably more potential, I think, than Christian Scott does. But his floor, like its ceiling and its floor with Tidwell, it's a fastball that'll be up to 98 miles an hour, sits, more 94 to 96. That's kind of the normal range. I saw him pitch twice in person last year. Slider, awesome. He got a new slider grip, wipeout slider, big time part of his swing and miss. He's developing a changeup. It's not quite there yet. He got a new grip for that too. So Mets player development has been doing work with these pitchers, making Mike Vasil, who we talked about what he is into. We'll talk about Christian Scott. Same with Blade Tidwell. So they're a big help. Below average command, that's a part of it too. So it's kind of a little high variance, where if they can get this changeup to be an average to above average offering, get him to be average type of command, he could be a mid rotation starter, maybe even as good as a number 2. But if you can't put all of the pieces together with Tidwell, what you probably do is you just scrap the changeup essentially, or have it barely be used, and you go 2 pitches, reliever, and he could be a late inning, 8th inning type of guy. Maybe who knows, maybe even a closer, depending. But a back end type of reliever, and he has such a cool name that something has to work out for a guy named Blade.
If nothing else works out, if the scouting or nothing, it has to be the name. See, that's the kind of simple breakdown I like. It's like Michael Scott. Telling me like I'm 5. You know what I mean? That's how you got to break it down. But Blade Tidwell, what I've liked so much about him is not only his strikeout ability that we've seen. Again, 153 Ks, 116 innings this past season. You definitely like to see that. Of course, the walks is something too, where the walk to K ratio is very solid. Again, the home run rate wasn't obscene, anything like that. So the floor, we're looking at, again, a back end reliever. And, at absolute best, potentially a number 2 starter in this Mets rotation. I mean, you really can't go wrong there if that is in fact the case. So at absolute minimum, this is an MLB caliber arm. It's to what degree? Can he put it all together, as you mentioned, or just scrap the change up? And if you're a 2-pitch pitcher, you are going to be in the bullpen. Not that every reliever needs to be a 2-pitch pitcher, but that just... I mean, Aroldis Chapman was a starting pitcher at one point in his career. If that is an example of, one thing with 2 pitches, I don't know what is.
Almost a ton of relievers that you see as very good relievers in Major League Baseball. If you go back and look at them in the low minors to mid-level minors, most of them were starting pitchers, and
failed starters, the Andrew Chafin way.
Exactly. That's how it works. So no, I love Blade Tidwell, and like I said, I saw him twice in person, so I'm a believer. It's just a matter of now, again, in year 2, because we have to remember, just like Kevin Parada, this was his first professional season. He should start in Double-A. I would expect him to kind of repeat there, and we'll see what can transpire. I'll be keeping an eye on that 3rd pitch and how much they could develop his command, because like you said, it's not like crazy walk numbers, but it's just putting yourself in not advantageous accounts by just not throwing consistent enough good strikes.
And the more he commands that strike zone, the more his chances of being called up are greater, right? Because that's the big thing. I have a feeling, especially in the case of Tidwell, when he does make his debut, it very well could go in part because the Mets, unfortunately, are just having a stretch where, the risk involved with kind of the pen that they've built, where it's everyone can walk everyone. Okay, now it's happening for this week. That's where we have a problem, right? So Tidwell's obviously a guy that you don't want to rush up per se. So when do you expect him to hit the bigs, and what do you think would ultimately be the biggest reason? Do you think it'll be him playing his way, where kind of the Mets have their hands tied, where it's like, we need to call this kid up, or do you think it'll be more so based on team need?
I sure hope it's the former. I hate calling up prospects because, dang, we are desperate. We need somebody to pitch, so just call up this young prospect to make his big league debut. That's not the ideal way to do it.
Let's not be the Angels with Joyce in every freaking pick they do every year, please.
Hopefully he forces their hands by performance. And I did put, if you go on SNY.TV, we're just talking about the top 10. If you want to take a look, it's pinned to my Twitter at PSL to Flushing. I did a top 30, so we're well beyond 10.
Yep.
Obviously, 10 is enough for a stream.
Yes, 30s if you're the diehards, if you want to stay for a couple hours, sure.
Exactly. But the I put for each prospect like a MLB ETA, and I slapped 2025 on Tidwell, and I think that makes sense. Basically, another full season between Double-A and Triple-A. And then making his big league debut sometime in 25, and we'll learn too. I don't know David Stearns and Andy Green, brand new to the organization. I know Billy Epler was very passive, and I lean more on the passive side than the aggressive side when it comes to promoting. But I don't actually know how David Stearns and Andy Green, the new vice president of player development, how they're going to feel in regards to at what pace do you call prospects to the next level within the minors, and then of course the ultimate call to the major leagues.
Yeah, no, understood. And my final remarks I'll say here on Tidwell is that while the Mets don't necessarily have the deepest farm when evaluating pitching, I think in the case of him, especially as soon as they picked him, this looked like a guy that, again, if he does hit the bigs, that he may have the best impact out of the bunch right now. And like pure stuff, I think Tidwell has the best actual stuff of the Mets' current ranking in their pitching. Yeah,
I would agree with that. And I would say in regards to the pitching, it's getting there. There are a lot of player development success stories. I would say on just the average, the pitching within the system had a better season in 2023 than the hitting did. Okay. Eric Yeagers head of player development is a big reason for that. I mentioned Dom Hamill. You have Brandon Sproat coming in. Tyler Stewart had a fantastic year. So while the pitching is maybe behind the hitting and just overall talent, the pitching system is coming along, and they are now, I think, drafting and signing and developing guys.
Oh, okay. I don't know what happened there, everybody. Just give me 1 second. Unfortunately, Joe just... Oh, wait. Is Joe still here? He's still
I got
here.
you.
All right, you're good.
Yeah.
Keep going, Joe.
Yeah, so Eric Yeagers has done a really good job, and where the Mets are currently, I think you're going to see more and more pitchers populate this list as we move forward.
Agreed. And Calvin Ziegler, out of curiosity, because I don't recall, out of your top 30, where do you have him?
16, something like that. You're asking me to remember 30? Somewhere around 16, 17, something like that. I'm very excited for Calvin Ziegler. I think there are some places that have ranked him far too low based on the fact that he missed the year with basically a torn quad. He had bone spur surgery last offseason. He was rehabbing it, tore his quad while rehabbing. He was able to come back for 1 inning, Lucy, and I would expect him to start with high A Brooklyn. And I'm very excited to bring, that arm has fastball up to 97. He could really ride it up in the zone, hammer curveball. He's been working on a split change. I talked to him 2 years ago. He's been working on that. So this will be kind of an opportunity to really see what Calvin Ziegler has at a level like Brooklyn this year.
Yeah, Ziegler is another one of those where when the Mets first drafted him, I'm like, all right, we got ourselves a Canadian. This is cool. We'll see what comes out of it. I know he's been on the shelf this past year. It's also crazy to see the makeup and the guys that were kind of leading the charge among pitchers in this farm the past couple of years, where they are now. Of course, the big one, the elephant in the room is Matt Allen, but that's like at the point where is he even going to be getting to the point where he can have hopefully a professional career, even if that's not the major league level? Like, he's a huge wild card. Did you even have him in your top 30?
No.
Yeah.
Matt Allen, unfortunately, is out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
I think that there's some hope within the organization that he'll get into game action in the second half sometime. But if there's a slight setback and he ends up not be able to return this season, he'll be 6 years between pitching and professional games. So
that's crazy.
As exciting as the pick was at the time, unfortunately, he's had just so many arm injuries, and he's working hard. He's in St. Lucie working, so he's trying, but we'll see if the arm will cooperate.
Right. That's the big one with him. So, all right. So before we get on to number 7, the remainder of this rankings, again, appreciate everyone watching live on a replay. We're going to take a minute so we can talk about today's video sponsor. So, Joe, for people on YouTube, you're not going to be on the screen for a minute. We're going to just pan to here. And guys, shout out once again to our great friends at BetUS for being a great sponsor on the channel today, because BetUS, guys, as they have been an awesome sponsor for a bit now, they're coming at you with the best money lines, parlays, odds, you name it, they have you covered. And of course, with the Super Bowl coming this weekend and you want to get in on the action and you wanted to hear the best advice and really the best guidance for the big game, check out my friends at NFL Picks and Predictions. The link is in the description. Check them out today so you get the best Super Bowl betting coverage possible. And again, check out BetUS for all your sports betting needs, not just for the Super Bowl, but again, if you want in on the Knicks that are about to play tonight against the Dallas Mavericks without Jalen Brunson, that I'm very concerned about, or if you want to get on NHL action, or if you want to wait till we do our WardyNYM parlays right around the corner as we head into the regular season, check them out today by clicking the link in the description separate from the YouTube channel. That way you sign up today to get a 125% boost with your first 3 deposits, not the first one, the first 3, by using promo code JOIN125, JOIN 125 for 125% boost with your 3 deposits. So if you deposit 100, you automatically get 225 to work with. It is that easy. And again, shout out One Sport to BetUS for being a great sponsor on the channel. And again, shout out One Sport as always to my man Joe for coming in to the show here. Apologies for the intro running there by accident for people watching live. I always have that hiccup. But let's go from number 8 now to number 7. This is honestly the prospect that I had the least familiarity on, given that he was just drafted, and that is none other than Collin Houck, the 19-year-old infielder. Is a lot to prove, obviously, just getting his professional career started. So what's the rationale behind having him here at number 7 in your prospect rankings?
there's so much untapped potential with Collin Houck. So when you go back to him in high school, he attended Parkview High School in Georgia, which may on the surface mean nothing, but it is the alma mater of former big league players, Matt Olson and, well, Matt Olson's current, but former is Jeff Francoeur. So a couple players
So
that
he's an
made
Atlanta
Major
Brave
League.
already, is what you're telling me.
He grew up a Braves
Yep.
fan, unfortunately. That's part of the deal, I guess. But what's so interesting about Collin Houck is he was a true two-sport athlete. He was also a quarterback in high school. And often you hear about two-sport athletes because, breaking news, professional athletes are very good athletes and can play multiple sports at the high school level. But Collin Houck was actually a 3-star recruit as a quarterback and was being recruited by SEC schools to play quarterback. So now, baseball was his love over football. So he gave up on football and decided to pursue baseball full-time, committed to Mississippi State. And with the Mets drafting him, he now gets to be only a baseball player. Football is now done, out of his mind. So scouts look at that as he is a premium athlete that has shown the ability to handle two sports at such a high level. Now imagine what happens when that 50-50 focus becomes 100 on baseball. So he's to break down kind of his general skill set offensively, bat the ball skills, pretty good. I'm not going to say they're top notch, but good bat the ball skills. The power is the exciting thing. He has above average raw power. There's a chance for even more in there as he physically matures. He's currently a shortstop. He's likely going to profile as a third baseman long term because he's not the quickest on his feet necessarily, but he's a quarterback getting recruited by SEC schools. He's got plenty of arm to play third base. So Collin Houck's one of the guys that I know it may be a little divisive as to where he should be ranked within the system amongst different individuals you talk to. But people I talk to say this is just untapped potential. He hasn't even scratched the surface as to what kind of baseball player he could be. And he went number 32 overall in the draft. So that just shows kind of what you're working with Collin Houck.
So the way that it wasn't the case with some Mets prospects is the opposite here with Houck, where he has all the athleticism. He's got all the tools. Now it's again about putting this all together completely and seeing what you have here. And you mentioned Mississippi State as he is committed to. What would you say your concern level, if at all, is with someone like Houck? Is he able to re-enter the draft? And if so, is that something that we have to worry about?
No, he signed with the Mets. So
okay, I thought so. I got confused because, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you sign if you sign with the team, say out of high school, there are certain instances where that means that, okay, they're not going to be committing to going to college. So what was the exception here? Can you explain it a little bit better for me?
Yeah. I mean, if you sign with a pro team out of the draft, you just don't go to college. I mean, that's kind of the best way to put it. So there's no like loophole of, I'll take money from the Mets and then I'll go play at Mississippi State for a while. So yeah, he is full blown a New York Met. Mississippi State was just the school that he was committed to because.
Oh, I understand. Now I got you. You threw me off. That's why the commitment versus the reality are two different things. That's what got me going. So he'll be starting this year officially, in the organization and everything. Awesome. Okay. Sweet. Yeah. How, from what we've seen, obviously, when the Mets first made the pick, initial reactions that I saw were kind of a mixed bag as well. He had himself, right around 100 WRC plus this past season playing, he
played 9 games.
Yeah. I mean, it was literally, it was literally nothing. Yeah. I'm not going to buy into it either. But if there is one thing that you would say sticks out about Houck outside of, just his pure athleticism, what would you say that is?
Raw power, for sure. I mean, he shows the ability to really impact the baseball. And now the whole thought process here is, you're taking him away from football. He's focusing on baseball. Now he could focus on the intricacies of the swing and really develop as a true baseball player. And when you go back to the draft, I had no inkling that there was a chance he was going to be there at number 32. If you looked at any public mainstream ranking, he was ranked think as high as 12 or 13. He was
That's
ranked
true. There were a lot
16.
of people saying that
Yeah.
it was a big steal for the Mets at the time as well. There were some people that are like,
Yeah.
I have no clue who Collin Houck is, which I found
That's the
myself in
MLB draft, dude. That's the
which
MLB draft. No one
which I
knows who any of
found
these guys
myself in
are.
the category of. But then you
Yeah.
have the people that again, like yourselves, that are really going out of their way, that are getting paid to make sure that they're following along with all these young kids to say, hey, wow, okay, we actually got him much higher than many expected. So that's usually a good thing. We're just putting those two and two together. And the power as well. I mean, for all we know, who knows? Collin Houck might just be a big power hitting infielder for this Mets team a couple years from now. So that's an exciting prospect for sure. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, that's certainly possible, and like I would expect him to start maybe with low A St. Lucie, if not the Florida Complex League. So he's a bit of ways, but he's an exciting guy to follow. That if he has a good first full professional season, you could see him higher on this list than where I have him right now.
Right. So plenty untapped potential there with Houck. So for now, we're going to have him here at number 7. And now at number 6, we're going to talk about the man that, again, took everyone by wow, just truly amazed, including myself, because he came out of nowhere. And that is none other than Christian Scott. Speak on Christian Scott and what was such a big season for him and this Mets organization, now finding himself as deemed by many, including yourself, including myself, the Mets' top pitching prospect and the man that probably is going to be the first to call, if need be, this season.
That's what I would say. I think a lot of people think Mike Vasil. My money is on Christian Scott, but he was a 5th round pick in 2021 out of the University of Florida. He was a reliever in college, and
wow.
The Mets converted him to a starter, which is something they also did with Tyler Stewart, who I had on my list, I think at number 19 or 20. And they're going to be doing very similar with Nolan McLean, who they drafted this past year in the 3rd round, reliever in college, starter in pro ball. And Christian Scott's just like the shining example of why this can work. It's a special fastball. There's no way around it. It's mid 90s up to 97. It's got exceptional ride on it. I mean, it's definitely one of the better fastballs in minor league baseball. And there's guys that throw harder, but when you combine velocity, command, because I'll get into the command in a minute, and the metrics behind it, it's a truly special fastball. He's got a plus slider that generates swings and misses. The changeup took huge strides in 2023. That it's at least an average pitch, if not slightly above average.
And to have at least an average, let alone above average changeup. Sorry to cut you off. As this point in the minor leagues is absolutely massive, because this is the big bugaboo that a lot of starters have at this point in their careers.
For sure. And, because very often when we talk about prospects, and everyone's just like, how do these guys have 2 pitches? When you're pitching in high school or in college and you're this talented, you could get by with 2 pitches. You don't need 3, 4, 5 pitches to get a lot of college hitters out. So Christian Scott made huge strides, and he is probably like the shining example of what Mets player development has been able to do. And yeah, absolute plus command as well. Like I was about to mention, he commands all of his pitches. So it's an exciting profile of stuff and pitchability, which makes me feel very confident ranking him as the number 1 pitcher in the system. I think he's probably like a number 3 type of starter at the next level, but I think his likelihood of getting there for as much as you could say like prospect likelihood, it feels like that profile is very clear to see.
Right. And I have a big question for you regarding Scott in particular, because we know that when it comes to Mets pitching, they have plenty depth this season. We got Tyler McGill, Jose Buto, Joey Fuego are all kind of sitting on the outside looking in for the rotation. So what is there to say about Scott in regards to how soon you could expect to call up? And 2, ultimately, do you think that this is someone that, again, could continue to roll out as a starter out there for the Mets? Or is he someone that has a stuff where it wouldn't shock you if, say, they want him in either a swingman role or to kind of see what they have in more of a limited bullpen usage?
I think maybe situationally. I know back in the day with Milwaukee, David Stearns had a history of bringing up minor league starters, having them kind of be like bulk inning guys out of the bullpen before making them full-time starters at the big league level. But when I look at Christian Scott, to me, he's the prime opportunity, one of the prime opportunities of what this team is looking to do, where David Stearns has been publicly open about wanting to give runway to young players. This year is about finding out what you got, because next offseason, you need to know where you're spending your money. Certainly the
Right.
Mets are going to need starting pitching help regardless next offseason, but you want to get Christian Scott a look this year, a sizable enough look, and same goes for Mike Vasil. If one or both of those guys can be guys you look at as, say, in 2025, they could be legitimate members of the rotation for the veterans minimum of, $700,000. That opens up flexibility to be aggressive elsewhere. And it's the same case with Brett Beatty at third base, with Drew Gilbert, who we'll get to, and Luisangel Acuna. All these young players this year, to me, has to be a lot about getting legitimate opportunity for these young players. And I don't want to put like a time frame within the confines of 2024 in which I expect to see Christian Scott, but I think it's going to be this year at some point. And I think he's going to be someone that I think it's going to be very, very fun to watch.
I think it's going to be fun to watch too. And Scott, in my opinion, has this feeling of lightning in the bottle, similar to the sense of McGill. Because again, he started the season in Double-A when he was called up by the Mets that same year, if not High A. David Pearson was called up straight from Double-A when he made his Mets debut against the Boston Red Sox. So Scott might find himself falling in this category now, similar to Mike Vasil too, just maybe to a lesser extent on the stuff that you're getting, but you're still getting, again, an arm that can eat innings. Scott, I think, is going to fall himself in this category because I know he didn't pitch an overwhelming amount last year, but as a guy that is transitioning now from a reliever to a starter, just under 90 innings this past season, a 2.57 ERA, a sub .9 whip, which is very impressive, a 2 FIP, 107 Ks, a lot to like here about Christian Scott. 107 Ks, a .5 home runs per 9. Yeah, I mean, this is someone who, truthfully, I should have had it on my radar prior. Like, how is Christian Scott's prospect ranking prior to this past season?
I think I had him like 13 or something.
Okay, so he was on the outside looking in.
But the changeup was a big thing for me this year. Like, if you read my top 20, because I did a top 20 last year, if you read last year's top 20, I talk about the need to develop the changeup and develop a little better command. And he did exactly that. And, sometimes when you say, if you do this, things are better, they do it. You reward them as much as he cares about SNY's rankings, which I assume he does just so much. Of course. Yeah, I assume he does. But no, just huge strides from Christian Scott this year. And it's a huge credit to him as well as the Mets player development system. And I will shout Eric Yeager's out every opportunity I get, because I think he is a unsung hero of where the Mets are headed organizationally.
Yeager's was a tremendous pickup to begin with, and we've been seeing it in spades since he's come in, and his impact automatically to these young guys. And Scott as well, I'm very excited for, as you alluded to. So yeah, guys, if you don't know already, Christian Scott, definitely keep an eye on the name, as again, this very well could be an arm that we start to get used to as soon as the 2024 season. So as we now get to the halfway mark around there of the video, let's talk now about a man that is probably my favorite player in this list, because he's had a taste at the MLB level, is a guy that I firmly believe that once he does return from injury, as long as he's in the Mets' plans, is going to have a key part of their future, and that is none other than Ronny Mauricio. Ronny, again, at the AAA level, we saw it there, just under a 300 average, a 850 OPS, a 108 WRC plus, which means he's above league average there, 24 stolen bases, 56 extra base hits, again, 23 home runs, 71 RBIs. Then at the major league level, in just 26 games, 2 home runs, 11 runs scored, 9 RBIs, 7 stolen bases for Ryan Mauricio, and that sample size is key to make note. 250 average, we're looking at a sub 300 OBP, around an 80 WRC plus, so below league average there. But Ronny showed something that we didn't see with Alvarez and Beatty and Vientos right from the jump, and that was like immediate impact and immediate ability to actually have a positive impact on the club. That's what Ronny did right away. So what's your rationale behind having Ronny as your number 5? Does it feel weird at all to you to kind of have him in this mix when he really is with the Beatty, the Alvarez's, and the Vientos group that have basically matured? So what's your thoughts on all of that?
Yeah, he's still prospect eligible, so he basically had to make the list because of such limited big league experience. But it definitely feels weird to rank a guy on a prospect list that, had he not gotten injured, we'd be talking about as the maybe opening day third baseman for the New York Mets. But obviously unfortunate for Ronny that he tore his ACL in the Dominican Winter League. To your point, on the offensive side, when you just look at the tools, a few people in baseball can hit the ball as hard as Ronny Mauricio can. His first, I think it was his first home run, or it was a scorching double. It was like 116 miles an hour, and it was like this high off the ground. Like, it was just
ridiculous.
Yes. So Ronny is he has some special power and barrel control. I think he's never probably going to hit for a huge average. He's certainly not going to draw a ton of walks.
He's got that Ahmad Rosario syndrome a little bit. He's got to snap out of it.
I'm going to be honest. It's when he was in the minors, I don't do comps. I almost never write about comparisons. I think it's unfair to anybody. But a name that I heard a lot is just look at what Javi Baez is. And that's a lot of what Ronny Mauricio is, where there's going to be strikeouts. He's not going to hit for a huge average. He's not going to draw a bunch of walks. But when he hits the ball, he really hits the ball. So I'll be interested to see how he bounces back athletically off the torn ACL, because that's unfortunate, because it's with a knee, you never know how they're going to bounce back. Like you said, he had the 7 stolen bases in the small sample size at the big league level. But if he could bounce back athletically, to your point, kind of off the jump, Ronny Mauricio certainly could be a part of the Mets' plans. Just unfortunately, we have to wait a year to see him again.
It is very unfortunate. I'm still very upset that it happened. It's like, of course, we lose Edwin before last season begins. That would certainly hurt. It wasn't to the same magnitude here with Ronny, but this was someone who, in a year where you want to see what you have, now's the time. And now we're going to have to wait. And once he does return, he's likely going to have to try to play his way into a role. There's a possibility he could be dealt by then, considering what the Mets figured out by third base then. Like, there's a lot of uncertainty now with Ronny Mauricio's future, I feel like. But having said that all, I really hope that things can work out, because the raw tools and ability are all there. And I love the fact that this is someone who provides elements that could lead you to believe, all right, he has the 5-tool aspect. He has the speed, the base running awareness. He has the defense. I know he's had his hiccups with his errors. I'm aware of that. I also know that he's someone that is obviously not going to be playing shortstop if he stays with the Mets. So how would he fare at the hot corner? Hopefully that's something he can continue transition in. I know that he's had his taste in the outfield, if I'm not mistaken, as well. But ultimately, this is someone where he has the flash, and he really feels like that type of player that is going to be able to embrace what it means to be a Met and to play in Queens well. He has that swagger to him the right way, and Ronny just gives me the vibes as a player that I think is going to step up in big moments for this team, especially down the stretch in a season where you need him to. So it stings a lot not to have him here. It stings even more considering this is the start of David Stearns' tenure, and he really wanted to see in particular what he has in someone like Ronny Mauricio. And that's why the rumor mill started right after Ronny went down. Oh, the Mets are considering it bad after losing Ronny Mauricio to injury, because they were fully expecting him to potentially either win the job at third base heading into the season, or at least be a guy where you can rotate and figure out, okay, we're going to have Brett at third today. Maybe we're going to have Ronny, maybe DH for all I know. Maybe Ronny's going to get some second base reps and McNeil's going to go in right today. Marte's going to have the off day. Like little things like that. So it changes the configuration a lot of what the club's viewpoint is on the season. But as long as Ronny can get back to his usual self, health-wise, his agility, his ability, all those things, I really think the Mets have something here in him. And that says a lot, because similar to Alvarez in his defense, Ronny, I guess, didn't surprise me as much because he was tearing it up all year long, but it was refreshing to see someone get caught up and immediately be impactful. That was my biggest takeaway for sure.
Yeah, and I get it too, because I talk about all these prospects. I tell you about their skill sets, and then they come up to major leagues, and more often than not, there's a huge adjustment period for minor league players adjusting to the bigs. There's always the exceptions to the rule, but I always say, go look at Mike Trout's first big league season, and if Mike Trout were a Mets prospect at that time, Mets fans would be crying to trade Mike Trout and say he was no good. So it's always an adjustment. But Ronny, certainly, when he came up, he flashed big, and it's a tough loss for the Mets, but opportunity for Brett Baty to really take third base and run with it, because we don't know what the future holds there. And Brett Baty is, I don't even want to say being handed, but largely being handed a significant opportunity that he can run with.
even if the Mets sign like a Gio Urshela or a Donovan
Mhm.
Solano, it doesn't automatically mean that they're blocking Beatty either, right? So it's really his job to lose. It was last year as soon as they traded Escobar,
Yeah.
right? And we were all calling for it. I was on SNY's Mets Hot Stove Live last year saying he needs to be called up. I didn't think he was going to be called up as soon as he was before we even got to like the extent of the entire West Coast trip. And I'm like, wow, okay, great, he's here, and he just couldn't lift the ball. A true quad A player that has a lot to figure out mentally too. Had a lot of hurdles last year. It's not an easy thing to not only struggle with initial expectations, but to do so with a large fan base in a huge market like New York when you're a Texas boy. So a lot of adjusting that Beatty still has to do, but firmly hope and believe that this can be the year where he showcases all of his tools to the ability that we want to see. I'm not expecting him to be an all-star or anything like that, but show us why you have been deemed as a top prospect the past couple of years. Show us why you were viewed highly as the guy that was the most MLB ready too. That was the big hype behind Beatty. A lot of people, including myself, were projecting this guy as someone who can come in and automatically provide the bat to ball skills that you'd expect. Haven't seen that, but hopefully this is a year that we do with someone like Beatty. But as we talk about Ronny Mauricio, now let's get into the final four here, and that is headlined by Ryan Clifford here at number 4. Ryan Clifford, a very fascinating prospect the Mets acquired in that trade with Justin Verlander last year. And I think if Drew Gilbert didn't ball out the way he did once he was dealt to the Mets in the minors there in Binghamton, I think a lot more people would be talking about Ryan Clifford, because he went from being a not high draft pick whatsoever by the Astros this past couple of years to now being deemed right next to Drew Gilbert in prospect ranking category. So what do you have to say about Ryan Clifford, his power, his ability, and how he projects here in this Mets farm?
Yeah, Ryan Clifford has the best raw power in the Mets system, and I don't even know if there's necessarily a close second. It's significant. This is potential for 30 plus home runs. I mean, a home run that I saw him hit, not in person, but on video, hit in Brooklyn. That just don't happen. The way Brooklyn's set up, if people are unfamiliar with the Brooklyn Cyclone Stadium, you should go to it. It's a fantastic
It's
place to take
awesome.
in a game, and it's literally just at the end of the Coney Island Boardwalk. You walk by Nathan's, you go to the roller coasters, the games, all that stuff, and boom, there's just a baseball stadium at the end of the boardwalk, and there's obviously the water right there, and the breeze comes directly in all the time to right field, and Ryan Clifford put one out to right center that I haven't seen. I mean, I saw Michael Conforto play there. I saw Brandon Nimmo play there. I saw Ike Davis play there. You think about, I saw Lucas Duda play there. You think about these type of powerful left-handed hitters, and I didn't see anyone hit a ball like Ryan Clifford hit this year. So it's very special power. He can draw a walk, so there is some plate discipline there. Some would say he's a little too patient, tries to see a few too many pitches. But I think this is a bat first player. He's a below average athlete he has enough arm to play the outfield. Like, he could play the outfield. He has a strong throwing arm. I just wonder if he's fleet of foot enough to handle it. I know the Mets are going to certainly at minimum split time with him between first base and a corner outfield spot. If he ends up first base on the defensive side of things, I think he has enough bat to handle it, and he's just got to trim down that strikeout rate. It was unsustainable with what he did in kind of the small sample size with the Mets. It was, I believe, over 37%, and if he could get that into the low to mid 20s, I think that's going to be, a perfectly fine sweet spot for him. And get him out of Brooklyn, get him to Double-A, and I think his power will shine in a way that will put him on the radar for basically all of the top 100 prospect lists. I know he made a couple, but I think he's on the precipice of being a potential consensus top 100 prospect in baseball.
I don't think it's going to take too long for him to fall there, as long as, again, those things go right. Get the strikeout rate a little bit down, because the power, as you mentioned, remarkable. 24 home runs, 81 RBIs, 44 extra base hits this past season, splitting time, obviously, in the Astros and Mets organization. And a big takeaway for me, and this goes in hand with Gilbert too, power from the left side of the plate. Man, oh man, if this Mets team could finally get a true lefty batter, not switch hitter in Lindor, but like a true lefty batter that can give you 20, 25, 30 plus bombs a season. Oh my goodness, that would do wonders for this team, really would. So I know that his ETA isn't to the liking of Gilbert's, obviously, because Clifford has more things that he needs to round out and fine tune about his game. He's a bit more raw and kind of what you're seeing right now, but just the power alone, as you mentioned, is going to continue to carry him. Hopefully we see that. And man, oh man, I think as much money as the Mets are eating, we're going to look back in a couple of years at that trade with JV and realize just how much it kind of changed the direction of the organization. Not even in the sense of just say their performance with the Mets, but who knows? Gilbert or Clifford could potentially be a piece for something bigger down the line. And if it is, then we have that trade to look back and thank for it initially. So Clifford, a lot of great things to say about a big year for him upcoming. And where do you expect him to start the year for the Mets? Double A?
I think he'll probably start back in Brooklyn, I believe, but
Okay.
I'm hopeful that you'll see him in Double A before the year's out.
Awesome. Can't wait. So there you go. We got Ryan Clifford at number 4. Then on to number 3, a man who didn't have a great amount of success when he came in the Mets organization yet, albeit small sample size, but is certainly hyped and for good reason. And that is Luisangel Acuna, part of the Max Scherzer trade the Mets did around the deadline last year. Acuna this past season, again, in Double A as a whole, had himself just under a 300 average, a 770 OPS, a little bit above league average at a 106 WRC plus, 57 stolen bases. So if you want to talk about a speedster, a guy that can take full advantage of the new rules, look no further than Luisangel Acuna. So let us know everything you know about him and ultimately why you think he may crack the bigs this season.
Yeah, I think he's probably going to start in AAA. He's already on the 40-man roster because he had been added by Texas last offseason to protect them from the Rule 5 draft. So that's just an easy path. You're a call away and you're already on the 40, so you don't need to designate anyone for assignment to make room. You just call them up and send somebody down. But as far as skill set goes, I think certainly base running is going to be a huge part of his game. This got 30, 40 stolen bases kind of written all over it. He has high baseball IQ, and that applies on the base pass. It applies in the field, where he's played mostly short and second. He's dabbled a little bit in center. He didn't do any center field in the Mets organization. We'll see if they want to give him some run there this season in AAA. But I think most scouts believe long-term he's probably best at second base, where I think he could be at least an above-average defensive player. He still needs growth offensively. The younger brother of Ronald is nothing like Ronald when it comes to an offensive player, other than they wear like the same type of like elbow guards and they have eerily similar batting stances, but let's not confuse Luisangel with Ronald in any way. He's not going to hit for power at all like his brother. If you want to be optimistic, like maybe 15 home runs, but I think that's even asking for much. Scouts that I've spoken to said it's been improved bat to ball skills. You saw a stride this year in that. He's willing to take a walk, still chase a little bit, especially on breaking balls. He has more of a tendency to chase on those pitches, but man, it's bat to ball skills. It's athlete. It's an exciting ball player that depending on the confines of your team, he could be someone that bats closer to the top of the order, or he could be a 9-hole hitter on a competitive team, that second leadoff hitter that sometimes, teams are looking for. I think Acuna is a good prospect with a pretty reasonable floor. He just might not have the ceiling that some other prospects have. Like, I don't think this is a future, superstar like his brother, but I think this looks like an everyday type of player at second base.
I think at absolute best with Luisangel Acuna, you're getting a guy that's going to be hitting for high contact, high OBP, but again, and similar to McNeil, when they're at their absolute best. But the biggest difference is going to be the base running. Again, if you get someone that's, say, him at his absolute best at the MLB level, could be, again, a 280, 290 hitter, an OBP in the 365, 370 plus range, stolen bases. I mean, even if you get him at just 30 a year, like, that's massive. So ultimately, this is in many ways a power hitter's game right now, We know that it's great to have contact hitters, but you shouldn't have a whole lineup of them because it's fun for a stretch, but we realize that it isn't going to work when you need it to most in those big moments, those big matchups. So what do you have to say about kind of the logjam the Mets currently find themselves presented in, not just with Luisangel Acuna, Jett Williams, as well as guys that, again, project best really at second base, and they're all profiling eerily similar as, again, high contact, high OBP bats. And we already got McNeil here, who, as much as I love Jeff and I wish him well, I don't foresee Jeff to play his entire contract with the Mets. I think that's going to be what they ultimately open up to. But even then, you still have Acuna and Jett Williams. So what do you have to say about that?
I mean, this stuff works itself out. I mean, I think often we get in this mindset. Look, I want all of these prospects that pan out. The harsh reality is they aren't. That's how it works.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. The harsh reality is they don't all pan out. And Jeff McNeil won the batting title just over a year ago. And I know the first half wasn't so good. The second half was a little closer to Jeff McNeil norms. I think he hit 280 something. Like it was a lot better in the second half for Jeff McNeil. So I'm not ready to, completely run a player of that quality out the door. But sure, if Luisangel Acuna comes up and fulfills the potential that he has, McNeil has to shift somewhere else temporarily. And yeah, hey, if Jeff McNeil goes ahead and wins another batting title, maybe you can replicate a Luis Arias trade when he got traded after winning the batting title for the Twins, got traded to the Marlins for Pablo Lopez. That could be a potential opportunity to solve one of your starting pitching spots. But I'm not going to put the cart ahead of the horse quite yet. Let's see the prospects come up and show something before I'm running someone like Jeff McNeil out the door.
Right. No, I agree. I'm not saying to do that right now whatsoever. Yeah. We're on the same wavelength there.
Think about it all. Yeah,
for sure. Absolutely. All right. Now we're down to the final two. I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to put these together. So let's start with the man who, again, headlined that trade with the Houston Astros, that being Drew Gilbert. Again, a lot of people love Drew Gilbert. He looked fantastic when he was dealt to the Mets organization. Batted just under 290 this past year in both high A and double A, combining the two, roughly 870 OPS, so 123 WRC plus, 12 stolen bags, 18 bombs, just under 60 RBIs. What is there to know about Drew Gilbert, and why is he a man that very well could have a decent impact on the Mets as soon as this season?
I think Drew Gilbert's going to work his way up pretty quickly, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
With the injury risk regarding Starling Marte and Harrison Bader, it feels like if there is a legitimate injury of some kind, it's just Drew Gilbert hanging out in AAA. I think he'll be big league ready pretty quickly. What I like the most about Drew Gilbert, because when we talk about these guys, I'm like Ryan Clifford, huge power. Luisangel Acuna, fantastic athlete, great speed. Drew Gilbert doesn't have like that elite trait. It doesn't he is a sum of his parts kind of player where he does everything to an average or above average level. And he's a high energy player. The phrase that you've seen everywhere is that he plays with his hair on fire. And I said that too after the trade, and I have retired that phrase. So I'm going high energy. And
okay.
you see that high energy in the field. He can handle center field. He has enough range for that. He has enough arm for right field. He could certainly handle left. So Drew Gilbert could play whichever outfield spot you need him to. I don't know that he would be, an elite defensive center fielder, but he'd be just fine out there, certainly in his young years. And you see it too at the plate. That boy ain't getting cheated. You watch swings of Drew Gilbert. Sometimes I think they need to give him a better fitting helmet, because sometimes he swings and the helmet comes flying off because he swings hard. And despite how hard he swings, he doesn't strike out at some crazy rate. He doesn't have a big swing and miss to his game. Plus plate, I wouldn't say plus, but above average plate discipline. The power, I think, is underrated. Like you said, he hit 18 home runs this year. Maybe that's a 20 home run type of guy at the next level. Love Drew Gilbert. I think he's going to be in Queens in no time. And I think he's the type of player that Mets fans will attract themselves to. In New York, specifically with the Mets, we have, as fans, have always attracted to the hustlers, the gamers, the old school adage of, he leaves the game with his jersey dirty. Like, that's what Drew Gilbert that's what he is. And he brings along with it a good skill set of being pretty good at everything and looks like a above average regular with maybe a chance for more than that.
And I think it's easy maybe for some Mets fans, like, average Mets fans too, that aren't going out of their way to deep dive the farm constantly, to see the new guys and Gilbert and Clifford especially and think like, oh, okay, cool, we have nice prospects. But let's not forget, not so much in the case of Clifford, even though that he skyrocketed over the past year, but their drafts in general. I mean, Gilbert, again, was another first-round pick that just fell in the Mets' lap because of this very, very unique circumstance that they found themselves in by the deadline, where it was just a match made in heaven. Eat half the salary or so, then bam, get a couple top prospects in return. So that is the short-term way that the Mets have, under Billy Epler during the time, were really able to build this farm overnight. That deserves a lot of credit for making the right moves when they needed to do this. And, the power stands out to me about Gilbert, not in the rawness with Clifford, but in kind of how rounded out it looks. Like, his swing is a thing of beauty. I love how short and compact it is. Like, that's very impressive to me. Like, as someone who is a Michael Conforto lover and truther and will be until the man is not in the Major League Baseball, his absolute best stretches, again, I see some similarities in that sense. So I'm definitely excited to see what Drew Gilbert can bring. And, this is in part the reason why the Mets did not consider a long-term option in the outfield. The same way that if they get Jorge Soler, they're not going to play him every day in the outfield. He's going to be mainly DH, right? So by bringing in Gilbert, this is now someone who's going to impact the Mets at some point this season. To Joe's point, I don't think it's going to take long. And with the current outfield construction consistent of Brandon Nimmo, Tyrone Taylor, Harrison Bader, and Starling Marte, in the case of Bader and Tyrone especially, these are expendable guys that they purposely brought in, where if, say, Gilbert comes up and he performs well enough where it's like, okay, he's here to stay, then you can get creative. You can either trade away one of those assets if you want to, or you can just have even further depth if need be. Either way, I think the Mets are in a very good position with Drew Gilbert, and I think he's going to quickly make fans realize that, wow, we do have some fantastic in-house options, and he's going to be the star of the new wave along with Francisco Alvarez, and hopefully Beatty still, maybe Vientos, and being the new wave of these baby Mets, if you will. He's fallen in that category, which is so sick. So now let's get into, last but not least, a man that I had the privilege of interviewing last year. Very humble, great discussion, and I'm going to be talking with Jett again this year, which I'm very excited about. Mr. Jett Williams. I mean, if you would have told me when I was talking to him last spring at spring training, that this guy was going to go on to quickly become the number one in the Mets farm, I would have said, what, you're really surprising me. Like, I knew there was plenty of hype with him in the draft as a first round pick, but to already be the Mets number one at the age of 20, that's a big deal. So Jett Williams this past season, 263 average, just under 880 OPS, tremendous OBP, a 121 WRC plus, 45 stolen bases. There's one thing he's got going right, because I'm a short schmuck. Jett's right around the same height as me, like a smidge taller. He's using those legs the right way, as I did too during my time as an athlete. You got 43 extra base hits, only 8 home runs, 55 RBIs. Again, another high contact, high OBP, speedster type second baseman. So what is there to share here about Jett Williams?
I love Jett Williams going back to the pre-draft process when he went to showcase events like the area code games where Drew Jones was there, and Elijah Green was there, and Termarr Johnson was there. And, I spoke to scouts that saw him there, and they're just like, this kid doesn't swing and miss. He just doesn't. He's obviously, he's a strikeout at the professional level a little bit, but what I didn't know about Jett Williams, because it's hard to grasp this general skill when it comes to just, within the confines of high school baseball. I didn't realize that he was a double plus plate discipline guy. Like, he drew 104 walks this year. He knows the strike zone. That is a God-given thing. And I joked, but after the draft, when the Mets took Jett Williams, I had tormented people in the Mets scouting department about Jett Williams throughout the draft process. So I have joked with a couple members of it that they're welcome for getting Jett Williams, as if these guys weren't scouting Jett Williams for years. And Joe, who saw him they've
known him since like out the womb, and you're like, I'm taking all the credit.
I'm taking all the credit. But Jett obviously had an unreal first professional season. He's obviously a top, whatever you want to call him in baseball, top 30, top 40, whatever, something in that range of a prospect. I don't care that he's 5'6". Neither do people in baseball. We have gotten to the point of knowledge of things that, sure, it does help to be the prototypical build, but I don't think people are getting dinged for height nearly as much as they used to, because guess what? Jett hits the crap out of the ball. Like when it may not be huge power. Like I don't think Jett's gonna be hitting 25 home runs in any season, and that's fine. Frankly, I don't want him to try to do that. I want Jett to be.
That's gonna mess up his game if he try. It'll be like McNeil. As soon as he's trying to pull balls and just take them all down to right, that's where we have issues. It's not your game.
Yeah. When but I'll tell you, if he guesses right and he jumps on a pitch, he could hit it. He could hit it a mile for a guy with his size. But he's stocky too, so don't even think about the
Very
height.
stocky.
You watch like his forearms probably like are as big as my calves, and he's got quads. Like it's a strong kid, and I think he has all the makings of an absolute dynamic, top of the order guy. And I have visions in my brain of Steve Cohen and the Mets keeping Pete Alonso, signing Juan Soto, and having sometime in 2025, Jett Williams and Brandon Nimmo getting on base at like 375, 380 clips for those three sluggers, and Jett stealing 40 bags or so. Because what it was a lot in Brooklyn and the minors with Jett this year, speaking to people that saw him, they're just like, Jett would draw a walk, and a walk was a double for Jett Williams because he would stroll down the first, he'd take his time, and then he would just take second on a steal. So, and it just such an exciting prospect that I think is a good blend for a team that is going to have some power with, the Lindors, the Alonsos, a guy like Alvarez. Like there's power in this lineup, but Jett has a chance to be an all-star caliber table setter, top of the order guy. He could play second. He could play center field. You'll figure out where to play Jett Williams, because I think with the kind of mindset he has and the skill set, he's a guy that he's going to force the Mets' hand. And I know he has been public that he has goals of making the major leagues here in 2024. I put his ETA at 2025 because I'm a little more passive by nature, but I would say bet against Jett Williams at your own risk.
Bet against Jett Williams at your own risk. I love that. I mean, look, any short cane, I'm putting on a pedestal right away, so sign me up. But secondly, I mean, not only the speed, but it's the discipline about Jett. That's what I always get mind blown by with guys that understand the strike zone so well, to the point where who knows, it might actually hurt him because these umps just are not getting the job done nowadays. He's going to be anal in there, and then you're going to have someone who is like, I don't know, Angel Hernandez or anyone nowadays, I feel like, where they're calling strikes a full ball or two out of the zone, and he's going to be standing there like, I'm supposed to swing at this now. Like, it's situational hitting, and that's a very important aspect of his game. So to your point, while he does have the power, he doesn't necessarily need to untap it all the time, because that's not part of his game. He's not going in there swinging for the
triples. That's good. That's why
exactly. He's just worried about getting on base. The power, that'll come naturally. For all we know, he may naturally become a 15 to even maybe a 20 home run guy like an Altuve if everything worked out, and that's like the absolute best case scenario. I think floor with someone like Jett Williams is that he's a fringe MLB player, and the biggest reason for his struggles is the lack of power, and wasn't able to transition nearly as well as maybe what you'd hope at the MLB level. But he's only 20 years of age, and we're talking about someone that could impact the Mets potentially at some point even this season. So I guess the question for Jett Williams, and this will be a great way to wrap up the show, is Jett someone that you think could realistically have an impact on this Mets roster over the next calendar year? And if so, where? Like what's the best way where you foresee that making sense?
So he will get reps at second base this year. He hasn't played second base yet as a professional. But more often than not, if you're a good athlete that plays shortstop, you could play second base. That's
right.
Typically how it works. He got some run in center field, so I think that could be within the range of outcomes. I think it's just it ends up situational. I think with someone like him, I think he's versatile, where maybe Drew Gilbert's in center and Jeff McNeil's at third, and Luisangel Acuna didn't quite work out like you expected for, in the interim, and you play Jett Williams at second base. So I think his versatility is going to be huge. I don't want to peg necessarily a position for him, but I think he's going to have the ability to handle center or second are probably better than shortstop, I would say, because the arm isn't quite a shortstop arm. So that's where I would say probably defensively, but this stuff, like I said a little earlier, Wardy, is this stuff works itself out. Someone doesn't pan out, someone's hurt, something happens. Things, especially for the New York Mets, do not go according to plan most of the time.
They do not, and we know that very well as fans. So with expecting the worst, hopefully we get the best, or it's somewhere in the middle. Wouldn't mind that either. But, Joe, this was an awesome discussion. I sincerely thank you so much for taking the time to break down your top 10 prospects. And like I said, it was an easy discussion in my mind because I was initially I was setting up my own prospect rankings, and I'm looking at yours, and I'm looking at your breakdown, I'm like, I only have one thing that I actually found myself in like disagreement with. So I'm like, let's have the guru on himself, because to your point, like Collin Houck is against someone that I have very little information on. So he's someone in particular I'm going to be following along with quite a bit this year. So before we wrap things up, again, I want to shout out everyone that took the time to watch live, people on replay. Smash a like and subscribe button is the easiest and best way to support the channel. Help us get to a couple hundred likes at some point. It's greatly appreciated. Check out Joe DeMayo, of course, the co-host of the Mets pod per SNY. Check him out with his latest article on the Mets top 30 prospect rankings per SNY and everything else that he's doing. So any final remarks before we get out of here, Joe?
No, Wardy, appreciate chatting as always. And like you said, check out the Mets pod. You probably subscribe to SNY's YouTube channel if you are a Mets fan. But if you want, you could watch this face and the better looking face in Connor. It's also in video form every week. So definitely check out the Mets pod, where we talk prospects, I would say, more than any other Mets prospect podcast out there.
You guys definitely do. And that's why I love to have you on for prospect discussions, especially.
Yeah, so it's a passion of mine, has been for a long time, but we covered a big league team too. So check out the Mets pod. Follow me on Twitter at PSL2Flushing. If you are going to Mets spring training, we will be actually doing a live show at noon before the first spring training game of the season on February 24th, somewhere near the entrance of Clover Park. So we will be on the premises of the stadium. So if you are going to be there for the first game, which I know a lot of people do, that game always sells out. Come check out the show. We'll be doing it live. Say hi. But otherwise, just keep following along. And yeah, Wardy, appreciate you, man.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joe. Good luck with that show. It's going to be awesome. Spring training is going to be a lot of fun this year, not only for Joe, but also myself. Be on the lookout, guys. We'll be coming out with announcements shortly on that one. But thank you all so much for watching. Greatly appreciated. That's Joe DeMayo. This is Tyler Ward.